guest this week is Chris Hay. You can find Chris's website at loveworkrevolution.co. Chris did some exploration during his 30s right after selling his company. He now just turned 40 in November of 2020, and he's working on a new project, a new mastermind, if you will. He has an acronym for the project he's working on and the mastermind he's building, and it's HEART, H-E-A-R-T. H is heal and hear your heroic heart. E, explore your genius. A, accept your mission. R, rebirth yourself. T, take action and trust. I would encourage you to check out his website at loveworkrevolution.co and also get in touch with him at chris@loveworkrevolution.co. Please sit back and enjoy my conversation with Chris Hay. My guest today is Chris Hay. Chris and I hit it off really well on a completely unrelated conversation to what we're going to talk about today. And during that conversation, we realized that we both are really excited about the same thing. And so I wanted him to come on and talk to us about that. He's originally from New Zealand. He's coming to us now from Barcelona, Spain, where he currently lives. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Sure, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. And as mentioned to you, I'm deeply grateful, particularly because this is my first podcast guest appearance. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm sure you'll go easy on me. I've got a lot of learnings that I've been working on condensing down, and really excited to share with your audience and beyond. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. So if most of the people that have listened to any of my past podcasts know that for me, it's important to have the guest give their backstory so that we understand who you are, where you came from, and it sort of lays the foundation for the conversation that we're going to dig in deeper about all that you're doing now and the new exciting project that you're working on. So if you can, and this is great for me too, because you and I've only chatted a few times, but it would be really cool to understand where Chris Hay came from and where Chris Hay is going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. An interesting thing happened to me when I was 31 years old. It was 2011, and I kind of feel like this is the beginning of the modern epoch of my life, if you like. Like everything that happened up until then was kind of a dry run or whatever, and then this one moment kind of feels like where I was sort of born again, if you like, what would become the middle part of my life or something like that. So basically, 2011, and I'm 31 years old, and I'm sitting on the beach in Bali. I've got a cocktail in my hand, looking out on the most spectacular sunset, and I've come here to celebrate selling my business, which I've been working on all throughout my 20s, kind of leading up to this moment with this great anticipation that when I sell my business, I'm going to have cash, and then cash will equate to happiness. And as I'm sitting there looking out on the sunset, I just feel dreadfully lost and empty and just completely bamboozled, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, that everything I'd invested, all of my hopes and dreams that, building up to this milestone and then cashing out was going to bring all this happiness. And of course, it just doesn't. So as I sat there and over the next few days while I'm on this vacation, I really was reflecting on the paradigm change that had happened in my brain, because I realized that concurrently I'd lost, my purpose and my reason for getting out of bed in the morning, because previously I'd had this business. Now I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life? I'd also lost my identity to a large degree because, I had been quite wrapped up and invested in this identity of being like this 20-something-year-old, pretty successful entrepreneur. And now I'm kind of like, shit, I don't even know, what I'm going to do next. And who knows how I'm going to go about figuring that out. But perhaps more than anything, I realized that I'd really lost my paradigm for how to find happiness, and I really believe that this is maybe not lasting forever, but at least, there's a golden glow that could last more than 5 minutes or something like that. So as I reflected on all of that, I was sort of thinking about okay, where do I go from here? And I knew that it had to be something entrepreneurial because I didn't want to go back and get a job like working for the man. But I knew that it had to be about much more than just making money. It had to be something much more impactful and meaningful and genuinely like helping people. Because my previous business, to be totally honest, like when I started it, I really was pretty much just thinking about, the money. That was my main motivation. So, as I reflected on all of this and, and kind of sat there for the rest of this vacation, moping around, kind of feeling sorry for myself. I really had no idea where to start and trying to figure out like how to rebuild my life. And so it began as I call it, I've heard other people refer to it as the dark night of the soul. This what turned out for me to be quite a long and painful, drawn out process that really, to be honest with you, lasted pretty much all of my 30s. So I was 31 when I sold that business. I turned 40 in this November just gone. And so really throughout my 30s was this really intense and difficult period of introspection and figuring out all the elements that I don't like about myself, and are there any elements that I do like about myself initially, and then really learning deeply, but not just about myself, but about how I could show up and do work that I would love and have a positive impact in the world.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Yeah, of course.
So we hear this so often when someone that's successful, right? And we hear from the wisdom of those who have accomplished something and they've reached some sort of financial stability. And then they get to that point, or they get to that moment of what they call success, right? What they originally were striving for, which was the money, and then creating this entity. And then potentially, right, if you have a business, the goal is eventually to sell it and cash out on that, and then maybe go to the next thing, right? But we hear so often that people get to that spot, they sell, they have the financial freedom, and then it's not what they thought it was going to be. And I think that the hard thing for people that maybe haven't gotten to that point yet, and the only reason I wanted to stop you here is because these things also get into my own brain. It's like, what was more painful, struggling financially, or getting to the point where you had the money and then it wasn't all that it meant to be? Like, if you had the choice.
That's a great question, man. That's a really good question. So I guess like to reframe that question, what I'm hearing is like, what was the greatest challenge? Was it the struggle for money, or was it the struggle for meaning, which came afterwards in my case, man? Yeah. Well, until I cashed out of that business, the money was the biggest struggle I'd ever had. Like struggling to build that business was the greatest challenge in my life that I'd had until that time. But it was superseded by what came next, which was the struggle for meaning. And I think, I don't know, I mean, for some lucky people, this might come a lot more naturally than it did for me. Young people who are more successful than you in whatever metric you might, measure their success, whether it's financially or perhaps a more holistic, congruent measure of successes. Like is how well they've found their passion or their purpose, and ideally, a combination of those two things. If they found like their passion, their purpose, and they're doing well financially out of it, I mean that's the gold standard, right? Like I think that's what we're all aiming for. So for me, making money was hard. Making money, or like making it even just an income, or a comfortable income that's good enough to live off and whatnot. Doing what you truly feel like you were born to do is, I would say, in some ways more challenging, because it requires that you know yourself at a much deeper level, which can only happen with great introspection and over time. But in some ways, it's easier when you find it, because you might you hear people say that if you find the work that you're supposed to do, or find work that you love, and it will never feel like you work another day in your life, right? So as you get closer to finding, as you sniff it out and you're on the trail and you're kind of getting closer and closer and closer with the various projects that you might be engaged in, and honing in on the work that you're truly born to do, that feels like play for you and makes you come alive, then I guess that part of it gets easier, and then you've got to try to like build your skill level to a standard where the world will reflect the value back to you in the form of financial remuneration, if that makes sense. That's a very long-winded way of asking your questions. To recap that, I guess, easier in some ways and more challenging in other ways, but certainly requires a much deeper level of self-awareness, I think, which probably, takes longer to get to than just like how to get a product designed in China and sell it on Amazon, for example. No disrespect to people doing that, but I mean, yeah.
Some people possibly will struggle their whole life, and it's unfortunate, and I meant that like financially, or also that they're not doing what they were meant to do on this earth, right? So the choice is, if you gave someone the choice of saying, okay, and the struggles usually are the financial part of it, your health, and then it's whether or not you enjoy your life, right? And that means you're doing something that resonates with your soul, right? Maybe those are there's probably more. I mean, there's a million books, but if I think about myself, it's like, okay, I have my health. I love a lot of the things that I'm doing, and I might not be at the financial level that I want, but I think if I have the choice, I'd rather be where I am and do this than to be financially free, but hate what I have to wake up and do every day, right? So, and I think the problem is until you get to the point where maybe you got to where you sold a company and you had some financial freedom, when people hear someone like you say, hey, I sold my company, not just you, I mean, anybody, I sold my company and I made a lot of money and I got to the end goal of what I set out to do. And at the end, I wasn't happy. And if someone hasn't done that, they have a hard time relating to it.
They can't resonate with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another way to put it is like at the end of last year, the year before last now, so coming into 2020, let me sort of zoom out again for a second, that like, this wasn't a one and done for me, like after I sold the business and had this experience of kind of like reaching an extrinsic goal and finding that this feeling of emptiness on the other side of it, like you would think that would be enough to kind of knock that paradigm cleanly out of my head and replace it with the new paradigm of only do things that are intrinsically rewarding, which, by the way, science has found that intrinsically rewarding tasks, things that you would do, that are rewarding in their own right, is like a deeper, richer, more rewarding motivation that leads to greater happiness. So if you can pursue that, then you will be happier. Even you don't have to get to the high paying job in order to realize that it's empty. Just research around for example, is it Daniel Pink's book Motivation 3.0, where he talks about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So if you understand that you will have a richer, better life experience by being driven by things like purpose and mastery and autonomy, then you can build that into your job crafting if you're employed, or into your business if you're an entrepreneur. So you don't necessarily have to get to that milestone and realize that it's empty. But I started out by talking about how you'd think that having this experience once at such a deep level would be enough to kind of totally rewire your brain, that you wouldn't make the same mistake again. But for me, at least, and I think that it's common a lot in our culture, we're so hardwired to be motivated by extrinsic motivators, money, the trappings of success, cars, houses, that that I didn't just learn it once. Like this has been kind of like the lesson of my lifetime. And after I sold that business and I vowed to myself that whatever I did next had to be about more than just the money, had to be more meaningful. I was still, for the several years that came after that, still tantalized, if you like, and tempted by lucrative opportunities, and I spent countless lost months and cumulatively years kind of going down rabbit holes, just like, oh, this looks like an interesting business idea, which is just financially motivated and whatnot. So I got to the point anyway where year before last, vowed, or at least my New Year's resolution was to remove all extrinsic goals and replace them with one goal, which was inner peace. Because I think that we oftentimes put inner peace or happiness on the other side of extrinsic goals, right? Like when I achieve this milestone, then I'll feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we we rob ourselves of happiness here and now, right? And so that's the trap that I've found myself falling into time and time again, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone, And so now, and when we have these big lofty goals, it creates a friction as well, of like where the goal is and where we are now, and then it leads to all of these feelings of inadequacy and lack of self-worth because I'm not quote unquote there yet. You know what I mean? So I'm still kind of trying to get my head around this, to be honest, at the deepest level. But I think that it's about kind of holding space for ideas that and visions that you might have that you want to achieve, but also kind of being less attached to them, I guess, so that they don't rob you of your happiness here and now. And above all else, being present and being grateful for the moment. And I've found as well, and spoken to a lot of other people who kind of had the shared experience as well, of like the more we do that and remove ourselves from this relentless rushing towards a goal that may or may not ever eventuate, and leaning into the future at the cost of sacrificing our happiness here and now, that the more we stay present, the more kind of, without getting too woo-woo, the more kind of magic shows up in our lives. Like, first of all, we just appreciate the moment more. So maybe, I don't know, you take time to go for a walk in the morning and smell the fresh air and admire, your neighbor's flower garden or whatever it might be. So you notice those things, but also, and yeah, this is, as mentioned, kind of borderline on woo-woo, but like magic can sometimes show up, like synchronicities and whatnot. And so there's one grand synchronicity that kind of unfolded in my life, which led to a deeper understanding of my work and my greatest gift that I feel that I've received and that I can kind of share with others. So if you want to go there, I'm happy to share that story with you as well.
Yeah, so because I kind of interrupted you because I wanted to clarify that you've seen both sides. Not everybody, I guess that was my point. Not everybody gets to both sections, right? They either and if they do, that, like you said, they're either really happy doing what they're doing, and I think it comes when you're serving others where it's in alignment with yourself, right? So if you 100%. Figured it out, which is really hard to do, but once you do, and you can stick with it and not have it be like, the way our world runs right now, to be present and all the things you're talking about, and to be still and to leave space, super tough, right? We have so many things coming at us, and we're told to, that you have to be really active out in the world of social media, and I'm just as guilty as the next person, but so it's really hard to wake up and take that walk and walk past the flower and actually smell it. And it's just, it doesn't exist. It's really hard. Right. So I interrupted you when you were talking about how once you sold your company, there was, through your 30s, you just felt like you were still trying to figure out how to find this spark, this bliss, this inner peace. Right. So I guess that's where we're at now, because I so rudely interrupted you, but I wanted to ask that question.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, well, let me come back to that, because I got one other thought that kind of might help put a bow on this. This concept of if you don't feel like you've made it financially yet, how does that reconcile with the experience that I was sharing? One way to look at it, I guess, is like Maslow's hierarchy, right? Which at the base of the hierarchy are like food, clothing, shelter, all of those things, right? And then at the top is self-actualization, and in fact, above that is self-transcendence, which is another category that he kind of added to the pyramid in his twilight years, which is kind of little known and underreported in management textbooks, but is an interesting concept that maybe we'll come back to later. And so there's no doubt that if you haven't made enough to those base financial needs yet, then you're not going, then the crisis of meaning is going to mean much less to you, right? Because you got to cover those basic physiological needs first. And so in some ways, it's like a first world problem, I guess, to a degree, to have like a crisis of meaning. But I still believe, as did Maslow, that if you are lucky enough to supersede the baseline financial needs, and if you don't feel like you've made it there yet, I would encourage you to reflect on if you really do need all of the things that you currently pay money for, because we get caught up in trappings and spend a lot of money on unnecessary things. Maybe you can live on much less and use some of your spare time instead of working to pursue things that are truly deeply meaningful to you. And as you said, Joe, like figuring out how you can be of service to others while serving yourself as well, rather than sacrificing yourself to serve others. But at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, which is the apex of the human experience, really, is this self-transcendence through giving yourself to as Viktor Frankl said, he's got a great quote where he says, self-actualization is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence. So you can only become your best self by losing yourself in service to a cause greater than yourself, essentially.
Yep. That's perfect. Okay, so you're now. When did you
back to the story?
Back to the story. So when did you get over that hump? Let's call it.
Yeah. So to be honest, like I'm still getting over it. I feel like it's an ongoing journey for me. But there was one moment of kind of like a pivotal kind of, I guess, turning moment, where I was at a personal development event in Hawaii, and we were asked, actually, with Patrick Combs, I was at one of his retreats in Hawaii, and he was leading an exercise where he had us write our eulogy from the perspective of living essentially our best life from this point forward. And it had been a really busy day, and it was last thing at night, like it was dark outside and dark inside as we lay there on the ground, and these little torch pen lights, and to write out whatever would come to us in terms of how we'd want to be remembered from that point. At our eulogy, having lived our best life from that point forward. And so I tried to empty my mind out, and really the only thing that came to me, as I reflected on it, is really like I really believe that love is, the universal connector, the one thing that we all share in common. And so I just wrote, Chris touched 100 million. And I thought I'll dream big, 100 million people with love in this lifetime. And then I thought, oh man, this is my one chance to dream really big. So I added an extra zero or zeros. So I made it like Chris touched 1 billion people with love in this lifetime. And I didn't really know exactly what they meant, and I still don't really, but like as I read it out, and we were given the opportunity to share with the rest of the group, and as I read it out, I felt this wave of embarrassment like rush over me, like, oh my God, I just made a total fool of myself. Like, who am I to dare to dream so big that I could possibly impact a billion people? Oh my God, I'm totally ashamed. And so fortunately it was the last exercise of the day, and I like scurried back to my room and kind of like hid under my pillow pretty much. And then I woke up the next morning, and I was still really grappling with the sense of shame and embarrassment of having, read this out and kind of dreamed this big. And so I went for a run down to the beach and did a meditation on the beach. And then on the way back, I had to stop through a public restroom. And I'm standing at the urinal of all places. And I looked up on the wall, and someone had drawn a love heart with wings. And I was just like, whoa, that's kind of weird. And then I looked around the bathroom, and actually someone had drawn love hearts all over the walls that I hadn't noticed coming in. And so I kind of walked out of there with my head spinning, just like, what the hell, like, what does this mean? And I grew up in like a very scientifically minded family, and so and encouraged not to believe in woo-woo stuff or synchronicities and that kind of thing. So, and of course, my left brain is kind of screaming pattern recognition bias, like the brain is programmed to recognize things like that. But as I reflected on it, maybe the right hemisphere of my brain, or maybe just my desire to kind of believe or make sense of things. But I guess, I kind of chose to adopt that event as some kind of affirmation, a potential affirmation from the universe that go all in, like, I let my mind go empty the night before when I had, like tried to think about how I wanted to be remembered. And it felt like it was source or, the universe kind of speaking to me and planting this idea of just really love is the most important thing. And I think that is, I'm not sure if it's, so whenever, like I meditate a lot, right? And when I meditate, I feel what can only be described as love, and people would get that through prayer and maybe being in nature, watching a sunset, that kind of thing. But when you stop thinking and your mind goes totally empty, it's serene, it's blissful, it's beautiful, and it feels to me like I can't think of a better word other than love, right? And so I don't know if love is fabric of the cosmos or some underlying kind of fabric of human consciousness, or both of those things. I'm not really sure, but there's something mystical about it, and so I chose to adopt this as part of my story, and as I reflected on it more, I kind of thought, well, not only do I take this as an affirmation that that I should pursue love and trying to make the world a more loving place, but I thought this love heart with wings is an interesting motif because it, a love heart with wings, it's ascending somewhere, it invites following. And as I reflected on it, I thought of this Steve Jobs quote that was one of the first videos that like self-development kind of videos that I watched after I came home from that vacation in Bali selling my business all those years earlier. And he has this great commencement speech at Stanford, I think, where he says, "This above all else, follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know who you truly want to become." And as I reflected on it, I was like, damn, through all of these trials and tribulations of my 30s, trying to figure out who I am, how I can show up, how I can help other people. Like, there's one thing I can put my hand on my heart and say is that I really did follow my heart, And so, and then I was on a flight, and you know how you get those quiet times on flights where you might be doing some journaling or whatever, and you just kind of get these flashes of inspiration. And so I started to etch out what would become this framework around like how to follow your heart and everything I learned about that. So I made it around an acronym for heart. So H is heal and hear your heroic heart, and E is explore your genius, A is accept your mission, R is rebirth yourself, and T is take action and trust. And so, yeah, like 5 modules, and I've really just been the greatest joy of my life to try to condense down everything that I've learned over the last decade, and try to make something beautiful out of it, out of all of that struggle. And I guess that kind of relates back to your initial question, is it easier to make money or to make meaning? And I guess tied to that is like, what's more gratifying? And in my experience, like this is brand new, and I'm actually looking for beta test people to kind of come and be guinea pigs with me. But this has been the most meaningful and interesting and kind of validating experience of my life, I guess, to get this stuff, to get everything I've learned ready to teach.
Yeah, that's awesome. So ultimately, you're gonna think of a name for all of this, or you have ideas, but we're like you said, as being transparent, this is new, and we didn't want to like force some sort of title to this, but you have it.
Maybe it's like your heart's path to your greatest destiny, or I'm playing with like discover your destiny, or something like that.
Now,
but I guess one of the pieces that I left out is like this thing about the love and making the world a more loving place and following your heart, is that I think like love is the language of the heart, right? And I think that when you follow your heart, and you find the work that you feel called to do, that can be your greatest conduit, one of your greatest conduits for love, right? So you create that work with the motivation of love, and you serve. I think you end up like serving people who resonate with your story and who appreciate what you've gone through and are probably going through something similar, and so you have empathy for them in their case, and you want to help them, and so that feels like love to me. And so really, like your vocation can become like one of the greatest vehicles that you have for manifesting love. And so if you believe that, as I do, that that love is the solution to most of the world's problems, then I believe that by following your heart to find your ultimate the vocation that brings you to life the most can be your heart. Your heart knows the way to, as Steve Jobs says, who you truly want to become, but also how we can create a more loving world in the process.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that I know as young adults, and I've put up posts about this on certain Facebook groups that I'm in, and I've reflected on this a lot, which is in the day and age that we're in now. There seems like we're constantly trying to fix something that's broken, right? And it's usually, and I'm talking individuals, right? I'm saying that we get to a certain point and we realize, like you, when you sold your company, like many of us, when we hit certain points in our life, that this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. It's not making me happy. All of the things that go through your head. And I keep thinking, God, I wish we could just get to the young adults earlier. Like just this whole thing shifts from where it is here all the way, like just take anything that any of the people that you and I know are doing, or the people like Tony Robbins, the work that he does, Dean Graziosi, the work Patrick's doing with Eric. If we could take all of that and just slide it earlier, and I know that at a certain point the young minds they don't have the attention span for don't have the interest in it. They're not mature enough to understand it yet. But there's got to be a point where if we took all of this and just brought it way earlier in the lifespan of a human and just got to young people early and said, listen, before you get to where all of the rest of not everybody's like that. Some people just find what they were meant to do at a really young age and are happy and life is grand. I would say the majority don't. They wander around really lost for a really long time. And the only thing that they always seem to gravitate to is making money. It's all financial. And so they go down this path, and then they come to realize later in life that didn't work. But then now we're in like repair mode, right? Instead, it's like, God, if we could just figure out a way to guide young people to say, listen, we can tell you now that money's not the answer. It's following your heart. It's being nice to people and loving and caring and empathetic and transparent and having integrity and all of those things that if you could learn those and navigate that, all the rest will come to you because you're deserving of it, but it's such a frustrating thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it reminds me of a story. One of my friends, Raj Janet, he has a similar kind of story. He has a wildly successful coffee company and business empire really at this stage. But he was working for an oil company when he graduated college, and one of his mentors within the company was a guy who was around 60 or something like that, and really didn't have a huge passion for the work, but he had another interest outside of work, which I can't remember what it was now, but it was I don't know, like work or something more tactile that he wanted to do with his hands, and he was always telling himself, "I'm going to do this when I retire." I'm putting it off. And then he passed away like at age 60 or whatever, and never reached retirement. For my friend Raj, that was it. That was like that was all all he needed to kind of be like, I'm not falling into that trap. Life is for the living. So yeah, and then to kind of circle back on what you started out by saying, where if we could only get this information into people's heads younger. If you're younger and you're listening to this, the one thing that I guess would encourage you to do, as well as following your heart, or maybe even kind of in tandem with that, or another way to frame it, or it even comes before really following your heart. And following your heart is kind of a slightly amorphous kind of thing to say. I'm cognizant of that, but I think following your curiosity is a great place to start. And so, like for me, having sold my real estate business, and then I had no idea that I was going to wind up essentially in the personal development space. Like where I come from in New Zealand, I had never met a life coach in my life. You know what I mean? It didn't even really register for me that that was a viable career option. It took me a long time to put two and two together and go, oh my God, like what if I could teach everybody, or what if I could teach people going through a similar, midlife crisis, for lack of a better word, or similar kind of dark night of the soul, or similar challenges, everything I've learned, how gratifying that would be. It took me a long time to get to that place. But I wouldn't have got there had I not followed my curiosity. And my curiosity in the first place was for personal development content. And so after I sold that business, came back, watched that Steve Jobs video, and that was the tip of the iceberg. Like the next several years were just a whole ton of personal development books and YouTube videos and everything I could get my hands on to try to figure out myself. And so following my curiosity. So whatever your curiosity is, I heard an awesome video interview with Common, the rap artist Common, just a couple of days ago when I was out walking my baby, and he was talking about like these same concepts of essentially service, being of service and finding your greatest gifts and using them to give service to others. And he was saying, he started out in music because he enjoyed it, and it was for him, it was therapeutic, it was cathartic, it was fun, it was playful. And I guess he was following his own curiosity. And the people say follow your passion. I'm like, I don't know what my passion is. What are you curious about? Like what are the books you read? What are the experiences you'd love to have? Where might you love to travel? Who would you love to speak to if you had the opportunity? You follow your curiosity. And so Common followed his passion for music, his curiosity and for music, and then realized how it could benefit other people, how the audience were reacting to it, and how it was obviously resonating with them and giving them, an emotive experience and giving his audience joy. And then ultimately, the cash comes as a result of that. So that's like one of the really key, interesting models that I discovered along the way as well. I need to look back up who the TED Talk was from, but I saw this one TED Talk, and the guy was talking about basically the default model that we have in society for happiness essentially is wrong. It's based around do, have, be. So it's like if you think of that, and like you do whatever it takes to have the stuff that you think you need, houses, cars, material possessions, in order to be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you flip that around, there's another interesting model which I would advocate for, which is be, do, have. And so I'll explain that. So essentially, it's be happy now. And the research, cutting edge positive psychology research actually shows that when we are happy here and now, happiness and optimism fuel performance and achievement. So if you're interested in that, you can look up a book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Akor, where he really dives deeply into that and how it finds that when we show up in a happy, optimistic state, we're primed to perform. We're more open-minded, we're more creative, all that stuff. So be happy now, and don't put happiness or inner peace on the other side of extrinsic goals. Just grant yourself happiness now, and then find. So that's be, and then the next step is do. So shorthand for do what you love. And if you don't know what it is you love to do yet, I would say follow that curiosity until you find it. And when you do what you love, ultimately as Steve Jobs says, as with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has a wonderful book called Flow, where he talks about the flow state that athletes get in when they're playing, that painters are in when they're painting, musicians are in when they're making music, but also in other professional fields that are less kind of elite, that everyone could find themselves doing. Like a chef can be in flow when they're cooking, or a coder is in flow when they're coding, and a designer is in flow when they're designing. And people who have podcasts are probably in flow when they're in conversation. And so through that flow state is where we create our best work. So if you can find work that brings you into flow, in that flow state, where time disappears and you kind of lose focus or lose touch with the outside world, and you're just lost in the work, like that is that's when you know you're on the right path. And that's that work that will never feel like work. It really feels like play. And so then the final stage of this model, be happy now, do the work that you love, or do the work that brings you into flow, and then have. And so the key thing with the have in this model, which is the first one where you're doing whatever is necessary in order to have. Now you're happy and you're doing what you love, and the have part kind of like follows you, magnetizes into you because you're doing your best work, which is in flow. And then eventually, sooner or later, when you gain a certain degree of competence at that work, the world will reward you because people will take notice and they'll be like, holy crap, like, Joe's podcast is amazing. And, this other work that Joe does that he obviously loves doing and shows up to with immense passion is like so inspiring. I want to be a part of that. Like, tell me how I can be one of Joe's clients, So, and, the money kind of gets magnetized to you rather than becomes a byproduct rather than you're going out to get the money. You're going out to do what you love and be of service, and money is a byproduct.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm doing some work now in my own career, and part of it is the piece with Russell Bronson, and he just talks like he literally today's live webinar that we did. He literally got on there and right out of the gate, he was like, if you are here to make money, you're in the wrong place. He's like, I am here to get you to shift your mindset and to figure out what it is that you are here to do and how you're here to serve others. He goes, and when you figure that piece out, all of the rest falls into place. And it's kind of like the whole thing where the universe gives you more of what what you think about and what you are attracted to. And so if you are attracted to complaining and feeling like woe is me and all of those things, that's what it delivers more of, right? So if you shift it and say, listen, the more and more people I can help, the more and more love I can spread, the more and more whatever, all of that goodness it just naturally happens, right? And then all the other things fall into place. But it's really hard for us where we are in our lives. Again, God, if I only knew that 20 years ago, or 30 or whatever, that's what's really frustrating. So
for sure. Yeah.
But I want to get back to what you're doing, this work that you're doing and what you're about to offer to the world and present, right? In what form is this going to be in? Is it going to be when you said you want beta testers, is this a course that you're going to run people through? Explain that piece of it to me.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm thinking probably a 90-day program.
Okay.
90 days and be a small group, maybe looking for 5 or 10 people and basically, just a donation more or less, if you like. It's not about the money, but I think if somebody pays, some money at least, they'll show up in a more committed way. So whatever, essentially whatever people can afford or are comfortable with, I think it's such important material that, and my passion is to get it out to, to whoever, and not let people be hamstrung if they have limited financial means. So, some very fair price point and I think a 90-day program to start with is enough to really get people pretty deeply seated in the concepts and really understand all this stuff at a deep level. And then if you want to go deeper longer, then of course you can do a 1-year thing or just even a month or whatever. So.
And what's the product going to look like? Is it going to be like in a Facebook group? Is it on your website? Is it some piece of software you've developed? Or
it's basically be kind of like a mastermind, where in a group training kind of environment where so we'll have a small group and just meet every week, once a week for 90 days, and then we'll have like a Facebook group. But so there are these 5 modules where we'll be chipping away, moving through these, through heal and hear your heroic heart. And so just real quickly, like what I mean by some of these words, like your heroic heart, like you're familiar with the hero's journey? You heard of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey?
Yes.
So like Star Wars and every major blockbuster movie is basically written according to this format where there's a hero and they're at home, they're in their safe nice warm bed, more or less, like the hobbits in the Shire, and then there's some catalyst and they're called to adventure, and then they go out where they meet allies and enemies and face obstacles and overcome these, and in the process they gain deep kind of awareness of self, and ultimately face their biggest fears, and then come back, return home essentially with the power to bestow on their common man, as Joseph Campbell would put it. And so it comes from all of humanity's oldest mythology and whatnot. So Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he kind of discovered all of this. And then Lucas, who created Star Wars, was one of the first to really adopt it into a major motion picture. But it's a really interesting sort of lens to view your life through, and I guess I argue that it's not just for the movies, but I mean, there's a reason why we kind of resonate with the heroes in movies, because we admire their courage and their following of their heart, really, to to face their demons and ultimately return home kind of a bigger, better version of themselves, and able to help their fellow people. And so Carol Dweck did a lot of work around the growth mindset and growth versus fixed mindset, and how basically if you think you can, if you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can, and the difference between fixed and a growth mindset. And I would argue that this is viewing your as Joseph Campbell puts it, that you are the hero of your own life story. And so I believe that viewing yourself in this light, or even just playing with this concept of like viewing yourself as the hero of your own life's journey, and that you have to face these titanic challenges and surmount them, and then how can you grow, and what do you learn as a result of that, and how can you benefit other people with what you learn as you go through this personal growth. Like, viewing your life as through the hero's journey lens is, I would say, the ultimate growth mindset. And then there's a lot in it, right? So the H is heal and hear your heroic heart. I've just touched on heroic. The heal and hear is like, heal is, they say we can only love others as much as we love ourselves, right? So this is like developing self-love and really becoming more compassionate with yourself and improving your internal narrative, and being more loving to yourself, so that then when you find when you move through the process and the program, and you figure out the work that's really yours to do, you'll be showing up serving from a place of love. And then to hear your heart, this is around like tapping into your inner wisdom through journaling and meditation and stuff like that. And then explore your genius is some of the stuff that we've already talked on a little bit, around discovering your superpowers or your zone of genius, as Gary Hendricks put it, as opposed to your zone of excellence and zone of competence and so on, which is so like separating out like what you're truly genius at, which is those activities that bring you into flow most often, and kind of do everything you can to structure your work life around those tasks and get rid of everything that drags you out of that. And then accepting your mission is built around something else that we already touched on a little bit, around like Maslow's hierarchy, and how we can only self-actualization is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence. So to serve and truly contribute to others is how we can be our best selves. And we see this in our political leaders and so on. If you think of like Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, some of these people, these icons who we really admire. What do we admire about them? We admire how much they've been of service to other people and the impact that they've had, right? But it's not only political leaders, also business leaders. Some of the great business leaders, for example, Elon Musk, said that coming from PayPal, he thought to himself, what are some of the other problems that are most likely to impact the future of humanity? Not thinking what's the best way to make money. And interesting, I read an article a couple of days ago where he's just surpassed Jeff Bezos as the world's most wealthy individual. Obviously on the rise of the electric car and stuff, with everything that's happening with the climate. But so yeah, accepting your mission is about like figuring out how can you serve, and is there a cause that you might give your life for ultimately? What do you care about more than you care about yourself? What would you do even if you knew you would fail, kind of thing? Like what's that mission that's so big that you could spend the rest of your life pursuing it and still be satisfied, even if you didn't fully realize it, but contributed towards it. And then the R stands for rebirth. So rebirth is really just like stepping into that new identity, because there's a lot, people will know you as they've always known you and expect you to always be who they always thought you were, kind of thing. But when you step into your life's greatest work, a lot of that has to change. And so dealing with the fallout of some of those relationships that might need to change, and also how to pursue the new relationships that will pull you forward and surround yourself with, people who won't let you fail. And then finally, take action and trust. So that's kind of what it sounds like. The take action piece is around like holding each other accountable and having, so part of this program will obviously have accountability groups and having that positive peer pressure of having to show up and did you or did you not do the thing that last week you said you were going to do that was going to move the needle forward on your most important projects. And then there's trust, finally just trusting. And I guess that's the slightly mystical piece, and when I talk about the trust, I talk about that event that happened to me in Hawaii and how that invited me to trust, to put aside my rational left brain, scientific thinking mind and believe that just maybe, the universe might be conspiring to bring great things about for people who have positive intentions. So, yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. And I guess it's safe to say you're in rebirth mode, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in rebirth. Yeah, you got it, man. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Okay, so what is the website URL? I'm going to put it all in the notes, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's Love Work Revolution. So Love Work Revolution. And so the word revolution is an interesting one. I've sort of talked about how I think by following your heart, you can find the work that you love and that will bring more love into the world. And then, the revolution piece is Gallup, which is a big research institute there in the States, did a massive survey where they interviewed hundreds of thousands of people and found that I think it was 87%, I could be slightly wrong on that, in the 80s, so 80 something percent, 86, 87 of people are either disengaged or like actively disengaged in their work, so there's so many, that's a disaster, not only for the personal suffering of all those people who have to show up for work that they hate every day, but the untapped human potential that's just going to waste because people are sitting there like not really giving a crap about like what they do, and just and at the same time humanity faces all these immense difficulties and challenges that we face globally around like climate change and poverty and all these really meaningful causes that people could engage with and make a positive difference, but instead we're languishing doing jobs that we don't care about. And Malcolm Gladwell in his book Tipping Point found that there's a kind of a magic number around like 20% of like when 20% of people latch onto an idea, then it reaches a tipping point and can spread through the rest of the community. So I mean the margin of people who are disengaged in their work in the high 80s, and the number of people who need to be, to find and do work they love in order to create a revolution or a tipping point, and like where we can see a sea change where it could ripple through the rest of the population is around 20%. So there's only about 6% of people that we have to move to find work that they love and create a more loving world. So that's why loveworkrevolution.co.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'll put that in the show notes. If someone wants to become a part of this, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. Just Chris, CHRIS, at loveworkrevolution.co.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. And then I'll get all of this in the show notes. And I wish you luck with this. I know this is it for you. I can tell how it comes out of you. I see your eyes light up, and you just know, right, that this is what you've wanted to do, and this is this speaks to you. So, and I think it's going to be amazing. I'm glad that you've decided to do this, and I look forward to seeing this blossom and help a lot of people out there.
Thank you, Joe, so much today. Today's been a big deal for me. As mentioned, this is my first podcast interview talking about this stuff. So I just really appreciate you creating this space and letting me connect with your audience. And as you mentioned, this, you can tell that this is it for me. And it really is, this is the last 10 years of my life kind of accumulating and coming full circle into, in my way of making meaning and purpose and sense out of all of the struggle of the last 10 years. So I'm, needless to say, I'm deeply passionate about this and intend to do this for a very long time. And so I look forward to several years from now when, you and I can catch up and have a beer together and say, hey, remember that time I was on I was my first ever podcast with you. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. Glad to be here in the beginning of all this, so I actually get to see it turn into something great, and I'm looking forward to it. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late there in Barcelona. It's probably been a long day for you, and it was really nice to talk with you, and I'm super, super excited about this for you. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Thank you. Peace and love, Joe, and to your audience. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, man. Okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. I'm very honored that you are listening to my podcast. And if you really like what you are hearing, please rate it. And if you have the time to write a review, I would be very grateful for that. Thank you so much. Join me again for future episodes.